number of people with COVID in intensive care has reduced from 49 this time last week to 42 today. These improving trends are a result of booster vaccination, the proportionate measures introduced in December and the willingness of the public to adapt behaviour to stem transmission.
Well, so ordinarily I would pull together several clips just to kind of highlight the point. But I'm sure if you've paid any attention to Nicola Thin-Lips or just to anybody in general from the SNP, in recent weeks especially, since around about December time anyway, you'll have noticed there's been a serious uptick in the amount of times that they refer to behavioural change and the amount of times that they refer to compliance. And more often than not in that particular clip that I just played there, but that was the first one that I came across to prove the point, essentially, you will hear, mainly Nicola Thin-Lips, as it's her that says it more often than not, you will hear her compliment or praise the concept of behavioural change. And the reason that I bring this up in the context of this video is because it really does appear to me as if they are just taking the rhetoric that they have been spewing out in relation to COVID and they're copy and pasting it straight into the climate change narrative in regards to behavioural change, which I'll come on to in just a second. But there's also something else that I've noticed a serious uptick in from this thin-lipped capuchin monkey, and that is this right here.
Our approach to managing COVID more sustainably.
Managing COVID sustainably. I heard Baldy John Swinney saying it the other day, and I hear her saying it continuously every time she takes to her podium to read from that piece of fucking paper. And I can't help but think, given the word use there, the choice of words, sustainably, learn to live with COVID sustainably, while we're in the midst of embracing sustainable developments, one does have to wonder if that is deliberate choice of wording. Is that another way of trying to tell you that we're going to be moving into embracing sustainable development goals? I don't know. I could be clutching at straws there, but nonetheless. So behavioural change, as Thin-Lips referred to there. So this article is one of many that's been doing the rounds the last few days, and it's about Glasgow City Council and their plans to lobby the UK government to increase the cost of petrol and diesel. And the reason for this, of course, is to coerce people, essentially, or get people to reconsider how they get about from A to B, essentially changing their behaviour. You know, it's no surprise, no secret, considering a lot of the publications that are coming out now from the Scottish Government themselves in regards to how they plan to achieve net neutrality by 2030. A lot of it is behavioural change, which, again, as I said, I'll come on to. So this is their publication that was updated on the 16th of December 2020. No, it was updated recently, I should say, sorry. But it came out initially on the 16th of December 2020. Securing a green recovery and a path to net zero climate change plan. And if you scroll down here, because I'm not just in the transport section, it goes on to talk about, of course, whilst the key focus will be on technological advances to green vehicles in Scotland, it is self-evident that managing transport demand and embedding behavioural change will also be of vital importance. Oh, of course. And my, behind the scenes, they really have been busy. There is a plethora of different publications that they've started unveiling, bit by bit, over the course of the past few weeks, past few months, or even the last year in general, all related to climate change, non-existent man-made climate change, you know, because they're climatologists at heart. But fundamentally, I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent, but has anybody else noticed as well, another pattern really when you think about it? Every single thing in Scotland, they seem to be able to claim that they can solve it. They can solve any problem they wish by simply coercing people or manipulating them, changing their behaviour essentially. Misogyny is still a problem in Scotland. Let's re-educate. Racism is still a problem in Scotland. Let's re-educate. Inequality persists across Scotland. Let's re-educate. Gender stereotypes exist. Let's re-educate. Climate change exists. Let's re-educate. Oh, we need to get people to stop driving cars. Let's change their behaviour, aka let's re-educate. It's very strange if you ask me. Rather sinister, malevolent even. But anyway... This is their national transport strategy, protecting our climate and improving our lives, right? And if we come down, it says here that we are now in an environment where the move to low and zero carbon transport is essential to our future well-being. In response to the global climate emergency, the government has made one of the most ambitious climate commitments in the world to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Over the 20-year period of this strategy, the role of transport in achieving this target will be crucial and will require further development and the use of low-carbon technology, but it will also require significant societal changes, including a reduction in the demand for unsustainable travel. Just replace unsustainable with unacceptable, really, because fundamentally, in the case of transportation, what this is about is removing your ability to have access to private transportation. They want you to rely on public transportation. Now, they can sell you the pipe dreams all day fucking long about everybody being able to obtain electric cars. That's just a pipe dream. It's not going to work. Really, in Scotland, of all places, of all countries, you really think that that's going to be a viable option for most people, considering one of the main objectives that they have, or objections, I should say, that they have when they're yammering on about inequality in and around their climate nonsense, is that a lot of people in Scotland can't afford a car as it is. So what makes you think they're going to be able to afford electric vehicles? And even if they could afford electric vehicles, you really mean to tell me that they're going to create charge ports all across Scotland? Don't think so. It's just unfeasible, isn't it? This is about making you reliant on buses or walking or whatever it may be. And then when you take into consideration their 20-minute neighbourhood schemes that they're talking about now as well, this is about making you become conditioned essentially to not really wish to go anywhere, to stay local. And of course they'll sell you the bullshit that that's to tackle the climate emergency, but it doesn't exist. It's bullshit. And even if there is a rise in temperatures globally, it's got fuck all to do with carbon. Especially to do with cars in Scotland. But anyway, as I said, it's about making it so you cannot go where you wish because there will be no cars. And fundamentally, later on down the line, that is what this will all boil down to. For the time being, this is all about people coming together, as I'll get on to slightly in just a second. This is about people coming together, singing Kumbaya, all that nonsense, when the reality of the matter is, later on down the line, they're just going to make it financially impossible for people to be able to afford a car, even if they refuse to go along with the narrative that's being portrayed here. Because at present, it's kind of given off the impression that it's a choice. It's about people needing to do what's right for the climate. But they know themselves, as they're typing this bullshit and putting it into PDF formats, that there'll be people out there, including myself, that'll go, fuck you. What about these people? Well, we'll solve that issue. We'll just make it financially impossible. But on top of all that, there is still that sinister undertone of behavioural change that constantly gets referenced. You know? Conditioning. So, we all also need to take responsibility for our actions. Of course. The strategy presents our vision for Scotland's transport system over the next 20 years, which is, we will have a sustainable, inclusive, safe and accessible transport system, helping deliver a healthier, fairer and more prosperous Scotland for communities, businesses and visitors. People will be able to make travel choices that minimise the long-term impacts on our climate and the well-being of future generations. We face a global climate emergency. Well, we don't know, do we? We don't. I am just so sick of this crap. It's arguably worse than the COVID bullshit in terms of narrative. I'm really getting sick of it. There's just absolutely no pushback. There's fake, phony global consensus. You know, if we just implement these policies, then we can save the climate. I mean, fuck off. It's just nonsense. But anyway, you know, we face a global climate emergency. Scotland must transition to a net zero emissions economy. So it's leaving about becoming a net zero society. It's about a net zero economy now, for the benefit of our environment, our people and our future prosperity. Our transport system will help deliver our net zero target. The Climate Change Act passed by the Parliament includes an increased ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 75% of 1990 levels by 2030. Transport is covered by the strategy, and net zero emissions by 2045, Transport is currently the largest contributor to Scottish emissions, and this will be tackled through a range of actions, including an ambition to phase out the need for, fuck off, don't do that, please, new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030. Oh, look at that. What it says there, if it would let me scroll to where I want to be, like, it's fucking annoying, this mouse, by the way. But, wait. Where is that? New petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2032. And changing people's travel behaviour. Also adapting to the effects of climate change. In Scotland, we are already experiencing the impacts of climate change, apparently. And what might they be? And we will adapt our transport system to remain resilient and reduce the harmful effects on future generations. We're already experiencing the effects of climate change apparently in Scotland. Could have fooled me, but they will also enable greener, cleaner choices over the next 20 years. Scotland will see a continued transformation in transport where sustainable, again, acceptable, just replace sustainable with acceptable. It's what they deem acceptable. Sustainable travel options are people's first choice if they need to travel. If they need to travel. You know, it's a big if, of course. We will design our transport system so that walking, cycling in public and shared transport take precedence ahead of private car use. Private being the operative word because, as I said, it's really just about getting rid of your ability to have access to private transportation. That's what it's about. Scotland will have a transport system that will help deliver sustainable and inclusive economic growth, enabling the whole country to flourish. Transport plays a key role in delivering Scotland's economic strategy's 4 priority areas of investment, innovation, inclusive growth and internationalisation. Oh yeah, okay. Complex travel behaviour, gender inequalities. Doesn't matter what subject matter the Scottish Government seem to be talking about, they will always find a way to implement their intersectional feminist fucking bullshit. Much evidence across the UK and Europe shows that women are constrained by a number of barriers that shape how they travel and their experiences of those journeys. Why? All because of a gender division of labour. Oh, it's a gender division. The implication from the wording of gender means it's gender stereotypes, etc., etc. Women tend to take on a disproportionate level of care and domestic tasks compared to men, and it's that society and stereotypes that have done that. Of course, nothing to do with women wishing to go into these roles. No, it's society and stereotypes. Outdated, of course. Due to this, women are more likely to make multi-stop and multi-purpose trips, known as trip training, combining travel to work with trips for other purposes, such as taking children to school, yada yada. Women were more likely than men to go to work via taking children to school. Women who work part-time are more likely to have a multi-stop journey than women that work full-time or men, whatever their working status. Further to this, public transport systems tend to be designed to serve the needs of commuters with traditional 9-to-5 working patterns, hence based on a travel pattern that's primarily male. Public transport timetables and routes are, as a result, not designed to fit travel behaviour. Shaped by unpaired care work and part-time employment, women are also more likely to travel by bus and less likely to travel by rail than men. It's relatively irrelevant. I just wanted to include that because it's just very peculiar how hard they're going in terms of how they're monitoring people and their behaviours. Changing complex behaviour. To tackle emissions, a key challenge will involve getting people to change their travel behaviour, both in terms of reducing demand for travel and how they make particular journeys. People's travel choices are complex and influenced by a number of factors. Choices can reflect, for example, personal characteristics such as age, sex, and presumably ethnicity. No, it was income. They can also depend on where people live and or work, geography, availability on transport, convenience, and the built environment. The activities for which people travel are changing too. More time spent on leisure activities, for example, has meant more people travelling greater distances to undertake outdoor activities. Also, the changing nature and location of work, land use, technology and housing, and the move to more online retailing have impacted and transformed people's behaviour in recent years. To achieve our greenhouse gas targets, as well as enable a healthier and inclusive society. What the fucking inclusive society? I mean, shit. Inclusive fucking society. They just shoved the word inclusive in front of, the most random of words. I'm going for an inclusive toilet break. I'm going for an inclusive walk. My dog took an inclusive shite. An inclusive society. I mean, it's just fucking bent. When people have to travel, they will need to switch to more sustainable modes. Acceptable. For example, many journeys are relatively short and can be undertaken by walking and cycling. Just over 34% of journeys under 1 kilometre are made by car, either as a driver or a passenger. This rises to over 50% when the journey is between 1 and 2 kilometres. Changing people's behaviour or travel behaviour to use more acceptable or sustainable modes will have a significant impact on our environment, as well as our health and well-being, as well our well-being and our health. Okay. Yeah, you just throw in your random words. Several pages down, we come to a section talking about taking climate action. We face a global climate emergency. We need to aim for a transport system that encourages people to make travel choices that minimise the long-term impacts on our climate and that will increase the well-being of future generations. Scotland must transition to a net zero emissions economy for the benefit of our environment, our people and our future prosperity. The policies to realise this priority and related outcomes are set out below. Okay, so it goes on to talk about reducing emissions generated by the transport system to mitigate climate change, reducing emissions generated by the transport system to improve air quality, ensure the transport system adapts to the projected climate change impacts, support management of demand to encourage more sustainable, acceptable transport choices, facilitate a shift to more sustainable, acceptable and space-efficient modes of transport for people, and improve the quality and availability of information to enable all to make more sustainable transport choices. So when they're saying there that we need to improve the quality and availability of information, well, that's kind of re-educating, is it not? Behavioural change once again. So, Scotland's future transport system will get people to where they need to get to, but this has to be done without significant adverse environmental impacts. Scotland will continue to be a responsible global citizen with a moral obligation and legislative framework to contribute to the challenges of climate change and to influence others to do the same. Global citizens, it's just pathetic. I know they're just puppets. I mean, all they're doing, day after day, taxpayer funded of course, they're just implementing United Nations initiatives. But the way that the SNP in particular word these documents, it is pathetic. They just come across as desperate. Anyhow, our policies will ensure people's travel choices will not have significant adverse impacts on the long-term future of our planet and well-being of generations to come. The reasons why people travel and the methods they use are not fixed. Societal changes, and lifestyle choices are changing, and people's behaviour is constantly evolving to reflect this. We will ensure that as people change their behaviour and select new travel choices, there will be more options available to them which protect our environment. It is recognised that in certain circumstances using the car can be essential. However, for the majority of trips, people have a choice. We will continue to, and for how long, of course, because there will come a point where they'll just outlaw car use in general. Come on. We will continue to improve the attractiveness of active and public transportation to extend these choices, but we all must take responsibility for our actions and the impact on the rest of society. Oh, shit. What have I done? I think there's just down here, actually. By our travel decisions. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. The impacts on society caused by our travel decisions. Firstly, by considering whether the journey is necessary, and then secondly, deciding the most sustainable, acceptable way in which that journey can be made. We will continue to explore effective solutions to manage demand. This will include better public transport and more and improved active travel options. Oh, it's riveting stuff, More people wanting to access our city centres, often by private car, is impacting on air quality and subsequently on people's health. While Scotland's 4 largest cities are introducing low emission zones, which through the restrictions on the most polluting vehicles will ultimately help improve air quality, more will need to be done. Transport Scotland Act of 2019 will enable local authorities to introduce schemes under which a charge may be levied for employers providing workplace parking places. This strategy will support a range of further measures and approaches. People and businesses will be encouraged to travel sustainably, acceptably, as a result of better integration of transport and spatial planning. This will be supported by opportunities created through enhancements in digital technologies such as more flexible working. And flexible working is it's interesting to note actually, because one of these documents, starting to become conscious of the time, don't want the video getting too long, and I've got other things to go through, but in one of these documents anyway, they do make reference to flexible working and this hybrid scheme that's now being proposed. And I made reference to this on Telegram on my channel maybe a week or two ago when it was first announced that even before the hybrid bullshit was brought to the forefront, it's been about conditioning for the longest time now. Working from home, staying local and all this bullshit. It's been conditioning. And it's like, as I said earlier on, when in regards to behaviour, the same thing is true of this. It's just they've just taken the shit from COVID and they're now implementing it into the climate regime. It's just one and the same. All the conditioning from prior for public health, And now doing the same for this, for the climate. Hybrid working. The requirement, or the less requirement to travel to and from work because you're staying at home. You're working from home and you're used to that by now because you've been doing it for the last 2 years. Because Nicola Thinlips and the fucking dentist told you that if you went to work, you're probably going to contract a deadly virus. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we will not... New technologies which are emerging to make vehicles less dependent on fossil fuels will contribute to the success in achieving the net zero target. However, that will not be enough. We will not build infrastructure to cater for forecast unconstrained increases in traffic volumes. Instead, we will manage demand and reduce the need to travel by unsustainable modes. Unacceptable. Not taking steps to effectively manage demand for car use is no longer an option. To help achieve this, we will encourage people not to make unnecessary journeys. It's just like, who the fuck are you to dictate what is and what is not a necessary journey? You want people to think that. You want people to second guess every journey that they make. Again, it's about conditioning them to get used to the concept of not having their car. Why? Because they don't want you having private transportation. Fuck ought to do with the climate, pardon my French. You mean to tell me that John McDonald, who's driving about in his Ford Fiesta, is really contributing to the perilous fate of our planet, but yet water plumes that pour out carbon, or volcanoes that are up that pour out carbon aren't doing fuck all? Nah, of course not. Nah, it's all about John and his Ford. Say how you really feel like. We recognise the clear need for people to change their travel behaviour. Small changes in people's behaviour can have a big impact on individual health and well-being. For adults, achieving the recommended amount of 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week helps prevent and manage over 20 chronic conditions such as coronary heart disease, stroke, etc., etc. It can also have a significant positive impact on people's well-being. Importantly, it is estimated that by getting Scotland active, life expectancy would increase by more than a year, given our current inactivity level. This is one of their other schemes that they've got. You know, this bullshit about their 20-minute neighbourhoods and enjoyable places or whatever it's called. I'm sure I'll come across it at some point in these documents. But there's this emphasis on physical activity and all this crap. It's like, who the fuck do these people think they are? You know, it's like, it's not up to you what people decide to do in regards to their physical health. Yeah. But anyway, let's see if there's anything else on this one before I move on. It's like every single time I try to make a video now, I always end up making them far too long. But let's see. In identifying sites for development of housing, employment, schools, offices, factories, hospitals, etc., and tourist attraction, transport considerations will play a crucial role and will do so as early in the planning process as possible. This will have a positive impact on the choices about the types of journeys we make, when we make them and how we make them. Our ongoing work on planning reform will continue to improve links with transport infrastructure in the long-term benefit in air quality and greenhouse gas emissions and improving health. Similarly, transport accessibility will influence the location, and design of future development. Transport will help planning and development and also ensure our communities are sustainable. We will continue to create a planning system that puts in place options that will discourage people from owning or using cars, of course. Yeah, of course. Also published fairly recently was the Scottish Government again, reducing car use for a healthier, fairer and greener Scotland. A route map to achieve a 20% reduction in car kilometres by 2030. In a little bit of backstory, I guess, or a bit of a professional introduction from the Rainbow Unicorn delegate in question.
Pleased today to have published a draft route map setting out how we will reduce car use to help create a fairer, greener Scotland. I'm not aware of any other country in the world which is committing to such an ambitious objective. It sits within and alongside our world-leading commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030 and make Scotland a net zero nation by 2045. This commitment is informed by the research on decarbonising transport published last September. The modelling in the research makes clear that to decarbonise travel at the scale and pace needed to meet our statutory emissions targets, we must not only switch to cleaner cars, we must also reduce their overall use. In short, we need to drive down our car use.
So obviously they've got a range of different methods that they intend to try and roll out across society to persuade people to stop driving their cars. But again, what happens if people just turn around and tell them to F off? You know? People obviously have to realise that fundamentally at some point later on down the line, irrespective of whether or not you decide to comply with their bullshit or whatever the case may be, or whether or not you just decide to take a bus, whatever it might be, the reality of the matter is they are in time just going to either outlaw being able to drive a car or make it financially impossible anyway. You know, frustrate drivers off the road or make it financially unfeasible. One way or the other. Because it's all very well and good to put these proposals in place and suggestions, etc., etc. But the reality of the matter is that if people don't go along with their bullshit, they're going to have to go to their plan B, which will get implemented at some point anyway. So, a route map to achieve a 20% reduction in car kilometres by 2030. I love this. Oh, a kid drew that. It's lovely. You know, all the kids that are learning about it. Oh, he's a child from primary 7. Oh, that's lovely. You know, learning all about climate change because that'll save the fucking planet. Nothing to do with brainwashing? No, of course not. Nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with brainwashing whatsoever. As it says here, a healthier, fairer, and more sustainable life, or lives even. Cute. Beautiful, beautiful riveting stuff. So, I know fucking words like shit. Inclusiveness. Oh, God. This route map builds on the vision for Scotland's transport system set in the second National Transport Strategy aimed at protecting our climate and improving our lives. Acknowledging that people's travel behaviours are shaped by the wider context in which they live and services they need to access. Our route map to reduce car use therefore includes a range of non-transport policies interventions, including the provision of good connectivity and digital access to services, the way we plan and invest in our public places, where we locate key services such as healthcare, and how we support our children and young people to make healthy, fair and more sustainable travel choices from an early age. Yeah, okay. Wonder what that amounts to. I've got a great idea anyway. The route map does not aim to eliminate all car use. No, not yet. We recognise that would not be realistic or fair, especially for journeys undertaken by disabled people or in rural areas where sustainable, acceptable travel options may not always be available or practical. Rather, the route map encourages all of us to reduce our over-reliance on cars wherever possible and identifies 4 key behaviours that we want everyone in Scotland to consider each time we plan a journey. Make use of acceptable or sustainable online options to reduce your need to travel. Choose local destinations to reduce the distance you travel. Switch to walking, wheeling, cycling or public transport where possible. And combine a trip or share a journey to reduce the number of individual car trips you make, if car remains the only feasible option. The route map sets out the interventions we are putting in place to make it easier for people to take these actions. Okay. This will be good. Implementation of the actions in this route map will help transform the way we live in Scotland by 2030. Yeah. Okay. By reducing car use, we will create a greener, fairer, healthier Scotland. Okay. So, in response to the global climate emergency that doesn't exist, but we need it to exist in order for us to justify our bullshit, Scotland's climate change plan, the United Nations climate change plan, updated in 2020, set our world leader. Oh, here we fucking go again with the grandstanding, this braggadocious approach that these people have. Whoever writes this shit, they really are pathetic people. And embarrassing, I'm embarrassed for them. Bold, brave, aspirational, world-leading, world-beating. Just the way that it's like they're desperate for attention. They're desperate to be noticed. It's like the child in the classroom that sucks up to the teacher. That is what the Scottish Parliament and the people within it remind me of. Every time they write publications that they know is to appease and impress the people of the United Nations. You know, oh, look at us, world-leading. Transport accounts for 29% of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions, with cars making up 38% of those transport emissions. Carbon reduction modelling has concluded that it will not be possible to reach net zero emissions through technological solutions alone. Reducing car use is essential in order for the transport system to be decarbonised at a pace that meets the statutory emissions targets set by the Parliament. You know? Oh, wow. Wow, okay. You know, the world's hanging by a knife on a knife edge, you know. But that's the element, is whether or not we can meet the targets that we set out. Anyway, Scotland, there's the United Nations getting mentioned, of course, but just conscious of the time at this point. Let's see where they mention behaviour, because as I said, it's fucking everywhere at this point. They keep talking about it, and as I say, it's just the fact that they're putting all these things in place, but it all boils down to they're trying to not only condition people to not wish to drive their car or feel the need to take their car or even feel the need to have a car, but it's about removing your ability to own your own private transportation. That's what it's about. But it's all hidden under this masqueraded shit of a climate emergency. And every procedure and measure and policy etc. that they put forth and suggest is imperative. It's just to tackle the climate emergency, you know? As if stopping driving about Scotland, as if that's going to even have the most minuscule impact on the overall well-being, quote-unquote, of the entirety of the planet. When we have countries like China that, despite the fact shits out emissions like there's no tomorrow, what they don't tell you is all of the trees that are growing in the outskirts of China now. I don't know if you've ever seen aerial footage or aerial satellite sort of imagery of China. It's quite remarkable, actually. But you got India, you got China, countries like that, shitting out emissions like no tomorrow. But yeah, they want us to stop driving cars. All they get to do is they please, essentially. Sorry. Right. So, we have developed a framework of sustainable travel behaviours. Acceptable travel behaviours. That is applicable in both rural and urban settings, as well as for those with a variety of mobility needs. These are reducing the need to travel, such as by using online options to access goods, services, amenities and social connections, if these cannot be accessed locally or in a sustainable way. Acceptable way. Living well locally by choosing local destination, which can make it easier to switch to more sustainable modes and more just distance driven if a car is still used. Switching modes to walking or wheeling or cycling or public transportation where feasible, and combining trips or sharing journeys, yada yada. With the aim being to empower people, that word again, empowerment, empower people to choose an option that fits their circumstances and travel needs. The route map setting out the actions that we will take between now and 2030 to support each of these 4 behaviours. In the near term, these are predominantly actions to encourage alternative behaviours. We are, however, committed to exploring options to further discourage car use, including developing a car demand management framework based on further research into equitable options to discourage car use by 2025. And we got the little roadmap here, or route map even. Reducing car use for a healthier, fairer and greener Scotland. It's all about fairness here in Rainbow Unicorn Land. Beautiful stuff. Broadband programme in 2021, providing superfast broadband access for 100% of premises. Free bus travel for people aged under 22. I love this stuff. I've heard them banging on about this in the Parliament, and they keep saying that this is great steps in order to sort of encourage young people to embrace sustainable travelling and put them off getting a car and whatever. Just because you're able to access a bus for free, I don't see how that, if you have the financial means to do so, why you wouldn't buy a car anyway. Just because Jenny fucking Gilruth and Nicola Bolcott headed thin lips have decided to give you the ability to drive about the place on your electric bus, I don't. Why the fuck would that stop you getting a car? Yeah, that's the consensus in the Parliament anyway. Workplace parking regulations and guidance, plant-based investment programme to support town centres and the delivery of 20-minute neighbourhood. Yeah, that's 20-minute neighbourhood shit. Again, it boils back down to the fact, as I said, that they've sort of conditioned people anyway to stay local with the COVID nonsense, and a lot of people working from home. It's the same sort of thing, where they want to put you into a sort of position or situation in the future where you don't feel the need to really travel that far from your home. You don't need to, because you've got everything within a 20-minute radius, essentially. It's conditioning, behavioural change. New national planning framework to help create a net zero Scotland. National prohibition on pavement parking, as well as parking at drop curbs and double parking. Free cycles for school children who cannot afford them. Learning for Sustainability initiative to support whole school approaches to sustainable travel, as well as wider sustainable practices. So again, it's just brainwashing children, and I hate when they do this, they blur the lines. So it's all very well and good to encourage children in school, if they're within a reasonable distance from their house to the school, encourage them to walk or cycle instead of getting their parent to drive them. I admit myself, I can be a bit of a pain in the arse. I live near a school, a primary school, and quite often I forget, if I'm out in my car, that the kids are out, you know, if it's 2:30, because obviously it's different times for the early years and as opposed to the older ones in primary school. So quite often I've forgotten in the past that the young kids have got out, and the whole road is blocked by parents parked outside the school, who literally then drive into the housing estate that's next to the school, get out the car in the driveway and piss off into the house with their kid. That kid could walk, I get that, but to kind of blur the lines, and we'll shove this in, and we'll encourage and educate children in order to sort of make them feel that, yeah, you can walk to school or cycle to school, but then they'll say to them, because there's a climate emergency. Nah, it's the same as when they go out to, you know, clean up the environment, go and clean your local park, or dredge a river, etc. But they blur the lines between that and, you know, climate change. It's, you know, pollution, plastic in the oceans, but then they'll go on to talk about the climate emergency. That's two different fucking things. Anyhow, investment in the rail network, investment in bus transport, low emission zones are being introduced in Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow. 4G in full programme, ability as a service investment fund, increased active travel budget, and 20-minute speed limits to achieve safer speeds on appropriate roads and built-up areas. I thought that was already implemented anyway. So the COOF continues to significantly impact every area of life in Scotland, and the recovery from the pandemic presents us with an opportunity to live and work differently. Oh, that's very convenient, isn't it? It's like the opportunity just fell in your lap. During the initial lockdown, when traffic volumes were much lower, many people had the opportunity to experience the benefits of quieter, less polluted streets that for many felt safer and more pleasant to walk and cycle in. People also had the opportunity to explore how their needs in terms of access to goods, services, amenities, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what the fuck word is, and social connections could still be met while travelling less and staying closer to home. Okay. Some people in certain job roles were able to shift to working from home, and survey data from 2021 July shows that 38% of people think that they will work from home more often in the future. It's almost as if what I was talking about 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, regarding working from home and conditioning seems to be somewhat true. And you know, the laugh of it is, I haven't even read through this document, but I already am predicting what the fuck's included within it. And I talk about vindication. What a big brain I've got. It's important to recognise that while the immediate impact of the pandemic on travel behaviours has been significant, the longer term impacts, which might still be felt by 2030, are estimated to be small when compared to the level of economy-wide change needed to meet Scotland's emissions targets. We must therefore capitalise on the opportunities seen through recent temporary changes in travel behaviour and support individuals with the policy and infrastructure changes that are needed to enable more significant reductions in car use going forwards. Okay. I'm very conscious of the time at this point, but I've scrolled down past a few pages, but you know, it's just the usual pish that you would expect. But I mean, if you really are that interested, if I can remember when I upload the video, whenever it goes up, I'll put the links to this stuff in the description if you wish to look through it yourself. Anyway, current car use behaviour, according to the Scottish Transport Statistics, 2020 cars made up 75% of total traffic volumes on the roads in Scotland, and the majority of all journeys in Scotland are made by a car. 2019, 65% of journeys were made as a car driver or passenger. The proportion has been growing over time, as has overall car kilometres driven. The proportion of car journeys made with only one person in the car has also grown over time. It's important to recognise that a small number of longer journeys account for a disproportionate percentage of total car kilometres, with around 4% of trips, those over 55 kilometres, accounting for nearly 30% of the total kilometres driven in 2019. Conversely, despite 45% of trips being under 8 kilometres in length, these accounted for just 12% of trips of total car kilometres. Right, that's a beautiful, lovely maths, don't give a fuck. People living in rural areas are more likely to have access to and use a car, and use it more frequently. In rural areas in 2019, over 70% of people aged over 17 drove at least 3 times per week, compared to only 46% of people living in large urban areas. This can partly be explained by poorer access to frequent and reliable public transport in rural areas, with analysis showing that 84% of rural areas have the lowest level of access to bus services. Yet, while access to cars is higher in rural than urban areas, it is by no means universal, with lower income rural households being significantly less likely to have access to a car than higher income rural households. As outlined previously, inequality in access to private cars also extends beyond income, with younger people, older people, women, disabled people, and non-white Scottish, non-Scottish, or British ethnic groups all less likely to have access to a car than the general population. And when you mean the general population, in this instance, what you mean is middle-aged white men, because you've essentially labelled every other fucking group bar them. Anyhow, again, I don't really see how that's relevant. So what if they are more likely to have a car than other groups that you've placed? Yeah, so fucking what? As well as inequalities in access to inequalities in terms of access to cars. Everything's inequality. Disparities immediately indicates inequalities according to these fucking reprobates. We know that car kilometres are not equally oh my god, equally distributed across Scotland's local authorities, with car kilometre per head of population being lower in urban local authority areas than in rural local authority areas. Oh wow. While the coup has created an unprecedented effect on transport and travel in Scotland, with journeys to work particularly affected by temporary workplace closures, car traffic on trunk roads is now close to pre-pandemic levels. The current direction of travel is towards more car kilometres being driven each year rather than fewer. Reducing car kilometres by 20% by 2030 will not be possible just by focusing on the shortest journeys or commutes to work, where it is easier for people to switch to active travel or public transport, but requires a more holistic approach that also supports people to travel less, switch to more local destinations, and reduce single occupancy trips wherever possible. Okay. The latest report from Scotland's Climate Assembly, speaking of, by the way, is it here? Just might as well get this out of the way before I forget. Scotland's Climate Assembly is to convene its final meeting this weekend, and they will be scrutinising the government's response to the goals and recommendations it made to tackle the non-existent man-made climate emergency fairly and effectively. They initially had set out 16 broad goals and 81 recommendations last year alongside the Children's Parliament, Anyway, and the government published its response to this in December with a foreword from Thin Lips herself, and I'm not going to fucking bore anybody to tears with what she said, but if I recall correctly, they accepted every single recommendation and goal in full, but I think for each goal and recommendation they gave a bit of a backstory, a blurb, or whatever it may have been, so that's probably what they're going over. Here nor there, it just came in my head reading through that there, Climate Assembly shite. Anyway, so it says here that 91% of its members selected to be broadly representative of the population. It's funny they say that, considering every single person part of it, as far as I'm aware, is pro-climate change in terms of they think it's an imperative issue that we must solve. Who are the people that are on this panel that were part of that assembly that think it's a load of shit, or at the very least hold a degree of scepticism? Nowhere to be seen. Funny that. Anyway, they agreed with the recommendation that we needed to provide education for all to support the transition from car use to public and active transport, so people recognise the climate impacts and change behaviours willingly in order to tackle the emergency in an effective and fair way. They also noted that its members supported a range of actions to enable a reduction in car use, including improvements in public transport systems and economic incentives. Furthermore, 63% of the Assembly members supported recommendation to phase in increased road taxes for private car use and use the revenue to subsidise public transport, explaining that the support was because our aim is to progressively, decrease the number of cars on the road. But you see, starts off as change willingly, gives them the perfect excuse to propagandise everyone with their bullshit regarding climate change. But failing that, yeah, I could have fucking told you that. Thereby reducing emissions generated in the production and use of cars. This is consistent with other UK research, which found that the public mood on road pricing has moved on since the 2000s, and that in 2021 more people support than oppose road pricing as a concept, with the majority of people agreeing that road pricing would reduce congestion and pollution. I completely disagree considering the state of our roads. Why I don't think anybody should be paid road tax until they correct the roads. You know? Fucking... Anyway. In addition to the findings from the Assembly, research into the attitudes and behaviours of a representative sample of people who live and drive in cities and towns in Scotland found that 70% of respondents agreed that it should be possible for everyone to undertake their most frequent journeys without a car, while 8% agreed that it's important for the government to enable people to have a good standard of living without needing a car. With the same survey identifying that 71% think that people should be able to meet their needs within a 20-minute walk. Did they just poll Green supporters and SNP supporters for their polls, I wonder, you know? It makes you think, nonetheless. In order to meet the target to reduce car kilometres by 20%, people throughout Scotland must be given the opportunity and conditions to change the way they access goods, services, amenities, I don't know, and social connections. Businesses and public and third sector organisations will need to support their customers, clients and workforce to make those changes. It is the role of government, in collaboration with other key stakeholders, the mystery stakeholders thus par, to create a policy landscape of both transparent and non-transparent policies that enable sustainable, acceptable travel behaviours to be adopted. Individual behavioural change happens in the context of the social and material environments in which people live, and our route map sets out the interventions that will enable people to adopt better ways of living by creating social and material contexts where reduced car use is a normal, easy, attractive and routine behaviour to adopt. Yeah, it's the way they talk about it as if we're fucking lab rats half the time, you know. Ah, dear. But really getting conscious of the time here. But I just want to see what else they refer to here. I mean, as I say, I'm probably missing out quite a lot of stuff that has some form of relevance, but can't really continue too much longer. I just want to see what else it says. Sorry, I shouldn't maybe do this in real time. I should probably pause it. Whatever, man. Let's see what else it says. Like, okay. Interventions to reduce car use have been considered in the context of the capability, opportunity and motivation model of behavioural change, which recognises that for any behaviour to be enacted, people must have capability, opportunity and be more motivated to carry out the desired behaviour than any alternative behaviour. Capability refers to people's psychological abilities. Fuck. For example, knowledge and mental skills. Opportunity refers to the environment with which people interact, whether it be the physical environment or the social. Motivation refers to mental processes that energize and direct behaviour, including reflective processes. What the fuck? As I said, this like talking as if we're lab rats. It's malevolence, the highest order as far as I'm concerned. You know, national conversation on car reduction. The public is already engaged in the issue of climate change, and following Scotland's hosting of COP26, there was an opportunity to capitalise on the threat of the climate change. Oh. As the key reason why the government is taking action on the issue, particularly in relation to actions to discourage and continuation of the status quo. I love that fucking status quo. It's the same as that quote from earlier on where they alluded to the fact that the pandemic brought opportunities, you know, previously not afforded to them, and here's another one. Can't go back to the status quo. And we will build on the momentum with a national conversation on the rationale for the interventions we are putting in place. You know, well, and how do you plan to do that? How do you plan to justify it? Well, just spew out more bullshit about climate change. Yeah. Wow. Her behaviour again. Oh, Jesus Christ. Interventions to reduce the need to travel. As I said, I can't go on too much more. Pause that again to see what gets said. You know, so many different interventions and recommendations and suggestions and ideas, etc., etc. But, you know, a lot of it when it comes to behaviour and, you know, moving forward and changing behaviour, etc., it's almost like micromanagement. You know, just controlling every aspect of your life in some shape or form. Or overseeing it, anyway. But it says here, continuing the 300,000 annual investment in the Eco Schools Scotland programme as part of the Learning for Sustainability programme. This programme supports young people to learn and engage with climate change, which is a political issue, not a fucking issue in terms of the planet being on the brink of disaster and impending doom. It's a political issue. It's a political issue for a multitude of reasons. But the main one being that the solutions to rectify and solve the problem of climate change is to implement political, ideological changes and transformations across society. Progressive, equitable, socially just societies that focus more on well-being and feelings and diversity and inclusion, etc., 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 as opposed to the status quo. Progressivism, climate justice, social justice. You know, that's what it's about. There's a heavy emphasis on climate justice as it goes. That's fucking that. I'll look into that because I'm not entirely sure I've heard of that before. But that really pisses me off how they get away with brainwashing our youth because, oh, but you know, we're helping them to learn about climate change. But look how young, from nursery age. So they want to teach little nursery kids that the planet's going to burn to a cinder unless we implement the policy changes that they've put in their PDFs. Fuck off, you fucking cunts. I hate these people, man. I really hate them. You know, we promote the benefits of car sharing because they're talking about us in third person essentially as if we're retarded. You know, we need to have these things promoted to us. Further interventions to discourage car use. The sections above have set out the actions that we will take between now and 2030 to enable a significant reduction in car kilometres, largely including interventions to improve the material conditions that support people's physical opportunities to reduce their car use, etc. However, an important part of people's motivation to choose one behaviour over another lies in the balance of individual level benefits and disbenefits. So incentivising desirable behaviours is unlikely to be sufficient in a context where car use remains highly attractive in terms of individual level benefits, while the disbenefits to environmental and population health are largely externalised. So what are you planning then? Well, I think we know. Current approach to motoring taxation has also been identified as a significant barrier to the decarbonisation of the transport sector. Fuel duty and vehicle excise duty are reserved to the government. UK government and successive UK governments have frozen the rate of fuel duty each year since 2010, meaning motorists have benefited from a significant tax cut in real terms. The need to address the cost of motoring is now widely acknowledged, with the revenues from fuel duty declining as the transition to lower emission vehicles continues. Scottish Government will continue to engage with the UK One on the need for reform of existing taxes relating to motoring. Of course, but it's fine though, guys, you know, because it's all about protecting future revenues to fund interventions and support shift towards healthier, fairer and more sustainable, acceptable travel. Yeah. Coming at the end of this document, and as I said, this video's far too fucking long now. But you know, you get the point, I guess. I hope, anyway. Oh, they want to monitor things too. Yeah. Guess that. Yep. All systems go here in Rainbow Unicorn Land, like. All systems go, I guess.
Of the public to adapt behaviour, the willingness of the public to adapt behaviour.